welcome Wesley King, who is with New Church Ministries. I'll let him introduce himself, and I don't know if there's anybody else that will be presenting with him. So we resume now 11. We have until around 12:30 or so. So Wesley, introduce yourself and let us know what we're doing.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll just make sure, can everybody hear me? Thumbs up. Okay, wonderful. Well, it is so great to be with everyone this morning. I am in Nashville, Tennessee, so it's afternoon here, but I know it's morning still there for you. So we are so excited to be with you this morning. I am Wesley King, as she said. I am the program coordinator for New Church Ministry, and I bring you greetings from Nashville, Tennessee, but also from Kansas City, Missouri, where Pastor Terrell and Jose are from, who I believe that you all met this morning. And then also from Los Angeles, California, where our team member Joy is stationed as well. So we are all across the globe here. Like I said, I am the program coordinator for New Church Ministry. If you are unaware, New Church Ministry is a ministry arm of the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, that trains, equips, assists, and multiplies emerging and affiliating congregations and leaders within our tradition. We provide webinars on topics such as hybrid church and digital discipleship, things that are really facing the local church. But also we also offer some trainings and webinars on things that are facing the big C, global, larger, general church as well. We actually have one coming up this Wednesday at 12 p.m. your time about decolonizing the church. And I'll put the registration link to that in the chat box in just a second. If you want to look out more at our webinars that we offer, we have all of our previous webinars at newchurchhacks.com, or you can go to our regular website, which is newchurchministry.org. We also have a yearly training for leaders called Leadership Academy. We actually just held it 2 weeks ago, and we had 150 registrants from across 9 denominations come, and both of our panelists who are with us today played big parts in that training, and I'll introduce them in just a second. But we have tracks that are mostly for church planters. We call them pioneers, but we also have a track that is for established preachers and established pastors of established congregations that is called Multiply, which is all about ministry innovation. And so we offer a ton of different resources. It's not just for church planting. It's also for folks who are looking to innovate, looking to start things anew as if they were a new church. So we offer a lot of different things. So I do encourage you, if you've not heard of us, to go check out the website. I know that we'd be happy for you to peruse that information. Today, I'd love to just introduce our topic and introduce our speakers, and then we would love to hear from you. The three of us are just now joining. I know you had a session earlier today, but we would love to hear a couple things from you, and I'll prompt you on that in just a second. But I wanted to talk a little bit first about our topic for today. After some discernment and after some prayer, our panelists shifted not the topic itself, but the focus of the topic this week. And I think it's going to be really beneficial. So initially it was called How to Try, and instead we are shifting it to Why Try? Ministry innovation. So from countries to states to businesses to churches and neighborhoods, we are all facing challenges that we've never faced before in our lifetime. We are feeling the impact of these unprecedented times, and that's why ministry innovation is so important, and it's never been more important than right now. And it's never been the better time to try something new than now. So in this workshop, we're hoping to encourage all of you to not simply just survive in these times, but to thrive through them. And we're encouraging you to more deeply understand what some are calling this new normal. I know many of you have probably heard that term before. We're going to encourage you to prepare to lead by offering new expressions of ministry that you may not be as familiar with, but also to earn the ability to respond to the needs of your church and your community efficiently. And we're shifting this conversation because ultimately, it doesn't matter what you try or how you try it if you're not on the same page as to why we're doing these things, right? If we're not on the same page as to why we're trying new things, then it doesn't matter what we try or how we try it, because we're not going to be focused, we're not going to be aligned in the ministry work of God. So I'm super excited for you to hear from our panelists this morning. I want to introduce them really quickly, and then I want to give them time at the end of today, if they've got any workshops or books or anything like that that they want to plug at the end. I'll let them do that, because they do have a lot of resources that you might want to check out after this webinar. So first is the Reverend Dr. Deleslyn Kennebrew, who is here with us this morning. She is the Regional Minister for New and Transforming Churches for the Greater Kansas City region of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And we were so excited and blessed to have her just a couple weeks ago to give the keynote address at our Leadership Academy. And she preached during our commissioning service, preaching over and praying over 150 registrants for them to go out into the world and do the work of God in the world. And she brought down the house. If you ever get a chance to hear her preach, you need to take it, because it is wonderful. And then also our other panelist is Reverend Christy Love. She is the founding pastor of the Connecting Grounds, which is a church plant in Springfield, Missouri. And she's also the chair of the Religious Affairs Committee for the Springfield, Missouri chapter of the NAACP. She is also an author, and she actually helped develop and write a lot of the curriculum for our newest track that we added to Leadership Academy called Multiply, which is all about ministry innovation. So both of these women are fierce leaders in their field and in our tradition, and have so much to offer you today. So I am so excited for you that you get to hear from them this morning. I would love, before we actually get into some of these questions, we also have a polling question that I want to ask everyone too. Before we do all of that, since we have a more manageable size group today, I would love to hear from all of you. Just three things. Number one, and I'll put this in the chat in case you're like me, where someone says it and it goes one in and out the other. I'll put it in the chat just in case. But one is, who are you? Where do you serve? And what are you hoping to get from today's conversation or from this time together? I'll do it again. Who are you? Where do you serve? And what are you hoping to get from this time together? And like I said, I will put that in the chat box in case you want to see that. And what I would love to do is I'll go first, and then I would love to invite someone. And then if you would invite someone as well to continue this conversation. As always, if you don't feel like sharing today, no big deal, just say pass, and we'll honor that. Not everybody likes to be put on the spot, and we recognize that. So if you'd like to skip, that's totally fine. Just say pass. So I am Wesley, as I already said. I'm here from New Church Ministry. I serve there. I actually am taking a break from congregational ministry at this time. I've served as a church musician for the last 16 years. And so if you work in churches, you know you don't get a lot of vacation. And so I am taking about 16 years worth of vacation over the last couple of months. I am a seminarian at Lexington Theological Seminary. So I will have to get another internship to finish my degree, but I just needed a little bit of a break, and it has been well worth it, and God breathed. So I am excited. I've been able to visit my niece, who I'll show you here. That's her. She is 2, and so it's been really good to visit with her. And I am hoping to learn from these wonderful panelists, but also from you every time I am with these 2 wonderful women. And anytime I'm really in any situation like this, I always gather something that I can take with me and that I can use in my ministry moving forward. So I'm going to just go around my screen as it's set up on my Zoom, and I will introduce you. And again, if you would just answer who you are, where you serve, and what you're hoping to get from this conversation. So first to my left is Rosemary Blakemore. Would you mind going first?
No, that's fine.
Wonderful.
I'm Rosemary Blakemore, and I'm a layperson with Journey Christian Church in Northeast Seattle, Washington. And what I hope to get from this is I'm also the vice moderator of our congregation, and it's a small congregation that has been recently a merger between two disciple churches that were struggling. And so we're now struggling together on a journey, and we call ourselves Journey Christian Church for that reason. I'm hoping to get some ways that a small church can make big changes, but can figure out how to prioritize those changes. I think that's the best way I can describe that. We can't do everything, but we often think we want to do everything. So that's my question.
Beautiful. Would you mind inviting someone to go next, please?
Oh, yes. Okay, got lots of people I know online. What about Marvin Eckfeld?
Marvin Eckfeld. I came to the region in 1967 and have stayed here. Retired in 2000, did some intra-ministries, and probably retired again about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm here because I'm interested in how the technology can help us in our churches, and I know from being in worship services in many of the churches the different ways in which churches are using virtual gathering, and there are a wide variety. So I'm going to call for Albert.
Yes, hello, I'm Albert Whitehead up in Alaska. I remember the first Christian church here. The church has been in existence since the 50s. We're the only Disciples of Christ church in Alaska and are having some tough times. We've done Zoom the last year. We're trying to get some plans in place to get started, because we're in that life cycle of an organization where it kind of goes growth and then it goes down. Well, we're down in that valley, and we need to make some new missions and some new directions from our congregation. So we're in that point where we need to make some really serious decisions real quick. And I hope to get some ideas from you folks. Every time I attend these seminars, I get new ideas that, boy, I wish we could try that, or we got to try that, and we just got to get our feet moving. I will call on to Perlina Brock. Is that right?
I'm a retired disciples. My husband was a regional minister in the Northwest for 17 years. And so I am also involved in All Pilgrims Christian Church in Seattle, which is a combination of UCC and disciples. And we are fortunate to have some people that can do technology, and we have both the worship online and in our sanctuaries now we're beginning to start. And so I don't know, a personal thing, I guess, is I'd like to have some orientation of gender and education along that line, and how we explain that to our congregation. That's just one thing. Oh, I'm going to call on Virginia, who was many, many years secretary to my husband and in the region in the Northwest, retired.
I'm Virginia Aylesworth. I'm a member of Journey Christian Church in Seattle. And as far as what I'm looking for, I don't know if I'm really looking for anything, just looking to be a little bit more informed about what goes on, because I am, my body is getting very old, but my mind is still young enough that I want to know what's going on. And so my family says the nosy old woman. So I am the nosy old woman, and continuing to look for education all around. Thank you. And let's see, I'm going to call on Sarah.
Oh, thank you. I am Pastor Sarah. I use she, her pronouns. I am serving First Christian Church Puyallup, and I just started there less than 2 months ago. And so they did worship online really well, and then have done multiple transitions as we've kind of gone back into person and figuring that out. So my hope for being here today is really like just to kind of get a baseline for us to start and start reassessing what's next and how we continue to stay connected. Because we've realized we get more worship on YouTube, like people watching our worship than we thought we did. So now we're like, oh no, we really reassess what we're doing. So just kind of getting that knowledge as we transition, and like Rosemary said, prioritizing what we do as we transition into what's next. Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Precages. I'm at Journey Christian Church also. And I'm just here to kind of get a sense of what's working. I teach for a living. I know a lot about online tools, but I really haven't been the person to try to implement those in the church. So interested to see what works. Let's see, I'm going to call on Martha.
Good morning, I'm Martha Haynes. I am a member and secretary at Lake Washington Christian Church in Kirkland, and had the joy of having Marvin as an interim pastor here, and have worked with a number of wonderful pastors. Our pastor has been amazing. We have transitioned to Zoom quite well, and she has done an incredible job. We have a wonderful tech team that is getting us set up to go to the hybrid, where we will both be in person and online. And I'm here to just kind of look for some tools and understanding so I can help from the office and also help as a member of the congregation. I will pick Rob Wam since he goes to our church.
I had a feeling you were going to do that, Martha. And Martha's a little too humble to also say that she's the newest member of our tech team. And so, having gotten some recent training, I think she's probably leading, certainly ahead of me on where that goes. My name is Rob Wam. I'm a member also of Lake Washington Christian Church in Kirkland. And I really liked what Jennifer said about what's working. I think that's, this is a really good opportunity for us all to share the things that have been working well, as well as those things that haven't been working well. I know that we've already been in discussion about how important it is to make sure that as we move into the hybrid setting, that it is an alongside experience from both the folks that are in person and the ones that are online. And so I liked all 5 of the hacks that Rebecca gave us before, but that was one that in particular stands out to me. Let's see, how about Wesley?
Yes, hello, my name is Wesley. I don't know if I'm the furthest from the group because I'm actually from Marion, Indiana. And also to clarify, you're seeing my name actually twice in the list because I'm connected via an iPad for video and then you're hearing me through my phone. But I'm the ministerial assistant at the First Christian Church in Marion, Indiana. I've actually served with the congregation for, gosh, seven plus years, I think, at this point. We have been, since COVID hit, been developing our new, what we're calling our online ministry. So the opportunity to hear from others about how your online ministry or hybrid ministry has been developing, and the tools and resources you're using are just added tools to the tool belt that we've never had, because it's like you're making something new. We've never made the dish before. So what does it look like? What is the recipe? So it's just exciting to hear from other people and to hear from across the board your experiences and so on and so forth. And I will call on Ed, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce your last name, Ed. Did you pronounce it Houskin?
Yes, Houskin. My wife here is Laura Robinson. When we got married, I told her not to change her name because she'd spent the rest of her life spelling Hausken anytime she got asked her name. We're both at Journey Christian Church in Seattle. You're tired of hearing that.
I'm not.
I'm a lay person with no particular designs on any form of leadership. And I guess what I'm most intrigued by is what has worked for other congregations. For example, we've been doing services on Facebook, which has the great advantage that if somebody's out of state or isolated at home, they can watch it at their convenience.
YouTube.
Yeah, on YouTube. We've got some programs that go on Zoom, and I am looking forward to the day that I can uninstall Zoom forever.
And I'm really interested to hear not really what works for other people, not only from the leaders of this workshop, but I'm really interested to hear what works and what doesn't work in the different congregations that we have represented here. I'm really looking forward to sharing information. And let's see, I will call on Pastor Sasha.
Hi, I am Sasha. I'm the pastor at Journey Christian Church, and I don't get tired of hearing that from folks that they're from Journey. But I think what I'm interested in is, first of all, everything changes so quickly and so fast, and just trying to keep up with part of it is a lot of work. So trying to just keep up with stuff. Plus, we're also a church that we are going through transition, but we are also going through transformation, in that we are learning a deeper, broader, better understanding of what it truly means to be the church, and what does that call us to be and do in our community. So really interested in how do we go from being a church where I'm one of the youngest folks to really being a viable and vital presence in our community, when we know that is going to look extremely different from what we are now, but have no idea what that will look like. Just that it needs and will be very different. And I will move over to Teresa. I don't think we've heard from her.
Thank you. I'm Teresa Lee. I'm an elder at the First Christian Church in Kent. For those of you who are not from the Seattle area, that's a suburb of Seattle. I very specifically, my passion and my focus for my professional and religious life has been children and families. And as a retired college instructor, after the last year and a half, I have some technology skills that I can put to use, but I don't know how to use them in the church setting. And I'm specifically looking at what kind of innovations are for families to contact parents. We have a very small but very active group of families with young children. The oldest child in our congregation right now is 5, and the youngest is a couple months old. But those families are very, very active, very committed. We moved our children's program to Zoom. when everything was shut down. And for any of you who know young children, you'll know that was not a real successful transition. So I'm looking for ways that we can have ministry with families and children that helps not only the parents grow their faith, but helps children grow their faith in this very new landscape. And because we got a new minister a month or a year before the pandemic started, so the pandemic has left our church, which is 100 years old, open to innovation in a way that it's never been open before. So those are the parameters I'm looking at. And I will go to, let's see, Sharon.
Okay, I think maybe I'm the last person. I've been trying to keep track. I'm the oddball here. I'm a United Methodist, and I'm at the United Methodist Church in Kirkland, and we're called Lake Washington United Methodist, and so Lake Washington Christian. We talk about the other Lake Washington, but I'm a big believer in ecumenical and interfaith conversations and what we can learn from one another. And so when I learned about this, I thought, well, okay, my congregation, we're getting a little stale. I want to really get some ideas from you folks about what you have done to kind of continue to support and enhance your ministry during this difficult time. So thanks for having me. I'm very grateful to be here.
All right, and I think Becky, you still have to go, right? Would you mind going next?
Thank you. I'm Becky Taylor. I'm pastor of Seekers Harbor Faith Community in Billings, Montana. We have always met in small groups. We don't have a building. It's a very participatory model. And so we're not only in Billings, Montana, we're other places as well, and have been before the pandemic. But excuse me, since we have people from all over, I'm always searching for ways to become more literate, and ways to be more effective about building community, because that's kind of a challenge. And also as part of the new church team for the Northern Lights region, I thought it was important to participate in this, to hopefully get some resources to be helpful that way. So.
Wonderful, wonderful. Is there anyone else that hasn't gone yet to introduce themselves? Pastor Miriam, did you want to go? I know you've been on this all day.
I'll just introduce myself again. I'm Miriam Gentle. I'm the pastor at Northwest Church in Richland, Washington. For those of you that are not from Washington, that's not the Seattle side. There's a whole nother part to Washington, and it's actually the high desert. So don't think of Mount Rainier, don't think of the pine trees, think of scrubby sagebrush. Anyways, so I'm here not only to host the Zoom platform, but to learn. So I learn from each of you as I hear. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you all for sharing. This really does, I've been talking with the panelists today, and this really does give us a lot of insight. So I'd love to just share a couple thoughts before we get started here. First of all, Berlina, thank you for asking about pronouns. We're not going to talk about that today, but I did just want to say that pronouns are becoming more and more a practice of these types of circles that we're running in. And it is purely to be respectful to, whatever gendered pronouns people want to be referred to by. For some people, you may think it's obvious, and for some people, it's not always obvious. So us putting our pronouns in the chat box or in, on our name tags or whatever is not so much for you to know what to call us, but for us to open the space for those who may be genderqueer or transgender or something like that, to feel safe to put those. So we're not going to talk about that today, but I did want to just mention that really quick. And also thank you for being so willing to being open to that. speaking of being willing, I hear a big spirit of willingness coming from this group. It sounds like you have done some work already in this time, this pandemic, this quarantine. Whether you like it or not, you had to adapt. And so it's also great to see such a big laity presence here today. That is so thankful. I know all of the clergy on this call are always so thankful when lay people step up to help out, and it's not just falling to those paid staff. I know that they are so appreciative of that. We're gonna shift gears just a little bit. I hear a lot of questions and curiosity around technology, and I know that was what your first session was on. We had planned to do a little bit more of a step back and talk about why are we even trying this? You know, how do you get those people on board? You know, a lot of times it sounds like you folks are the ones that are ready to innovate, but how do you get other people on board to do so? And that's not always easy. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to try and meet your needs. One of the great things about doing this is that we hear exactly what you want to get from this. I have dropped into the chat the New Church Hacks link from New Church Ministry. There are episodes on there about the topic that you talked about this morning, hybrid church. Also a topic called digital discipleship and electronic evangelism, which is basically how do you do things other than worship outside of the, in this hybrid atmosphere. We're doing all kinds of things that are related to the church, not just worship, Sunday school, studies, private Bible studies, all those kinds of things are being moved virtual during this time. So it's a very interesting webinar as well. So that link is in there. I also dropped the link for our upcoming webinar, like I said I would, the Decolonizing the Church, as we continue to have these conversations about how we can be better allies to the BIPOC community, as specifically as this is being a predominantly white group. That is a great webinar that you should check out. It's next Wednesday at 12 p.m. your time. Even if you can't go ahead and register and we'll send you the link afterwards. And hearing from you helps me go back to my team and say, hey, there's a lot of questions about XYZ. We should look at doing a study or a webinar on that specific topic so that we can bring that back to these great people of the Northern Lights region and answer some of these questions that they had. So I am so appreciative that you all were willing to share that with me today. Really quickly, before we get started into some of these facilitated questions, would you please find the chat box in this Zoom, and on a scale from 1 to 10, and I want you to take out any kind of idea that we're going to judge you over how you answer this question. And I also want you to take out, if we didn't have the pandemic, what would your answer be? But number 1, on this side of the scale is I hate trying new things. I love my own routine. And then somewhere at number 10 is I love trying new things. Bring it on. Let me have it. So where do you fall from 1 to 10? 1 being you hate it, 10 being you love it. Where do you fall? And I want you to take out, we're not going to judge you. If you don't like new things, that's okay. We're going to work on that. And then also, if you hadn't had to try new things because of this pandemic, where would you have landed? Okay, 6 to 7, 9. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being honest. I figured that the numbers would be pretty high after hearing some of you and your curiosity around this topic and the topic of this morning. I figured it would be pretty high. So that's exciting. So what I'd love to do is start with a couple facilitated questions for our panelists. Again, Dr. Kennebrew and Reverend Love. And then we're going to have a Q&A time where we can have some of those more specific, tangible things that you want to get from this conversation to get out of it. So let me just start. I'm going to start with question number 2. And I'm going to direct this first to Reverend Dr. Kennebrew. Would you please, Deleslin, share a time that you tried something new in ministry, something that went well, but also something that didn't go so well? And what lessons did you learn from that? And then I'll ask the same question to Reverend Love.
Well, first of all, greetings, everyone. Greetings. I'm Reverend Dr. Delesslyn Kennebrew. I serve as the Regional Minister for Ministry Innovation in the Greater Kansas City region. So I am excited to be with you all online it's afternoon my time. Oh gosh, that's something that I've tried that worked well and something that I've tried that has not worked so well. I'll start with the not so well so we can end on a high note. Something that did not work well, gosh, I remember this was some years ago because I've served several churches before I actually began in regional ministry. And I was actually doing youth ministry at the time. I was doing youth ministry at the time. And I remember, of course, you know, with youth, you always trying to figure out what they're going to show up for and, you know, and if they're going to show up and that kind of thing. And then also it is not just the youth, but it's the parents, because the parents still have to drive them there. The parents still have to be engaged in some kind of way. I don't care what the youth say, you know, they may want all kind of stuff, but if mama not paying for it, if, you know, if they're not gonna have a ride, it ain't gonna work out. So I remember we had actually planned a youth retreat. And the youth seemed to be all excited about the youth retreat. We had the location picked. We had done of course, the applications, which was really just like the permission slip, had the schedule, activities, had the chaperones, and we were excited. Of course, the youth, oh yeah, Pastor Delesslyn, yeah, we're gonna be there. I'm so excited. Da, 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 da. And week after week passed. And we waiting for them sign-ups. We waiting for that registration fee. Oh yeah. It's on I got you next Sunday. I got you next Sunday. Well, the next Sunday came, and then the next Sunday came, and then the next Sunday came. And then the final Sunday came for sign-ups. And I think we had maybe 2 youth to sign up for the retreat. And of course, in advance, you have to, do certain things with the retreat center. We were going to rent a bus, so we wouldn't have to have all these different cars and everything. And needless to say, we ended up canceling. We had to cancel that retreat because we just didn't have the participation needed, for whatever reason. And and I'll say this too. And so apparently the bus company never got the memo with the person that I was communicated with. So we're at work one day, and this charter bus drives up into the church parking lot, get ready to pick up some youth for the youth retreat. And I was like, sir, we canceled this retreat like a few weeks back. And that was kind of embarrassing, but we live and we learn and we keep moving. So that's something that did not work too well. But one thing that I learned from that though is when we do plan, or when I do plan, and I don't do it anymore, but definitely something I share with other youth ministers is when you are planning a major event, if you will, especially something like that requires taking the kids off, that kind of thing. Have a parents meeting and kind of gauge the support of the parents for the event. Because it don't matter what the kids say. Like, they can be all excited or whatever, but if you don't have the buy-in from the parents, then, it's going to be thumbs down, and that bus going to show up, honey, and ain't nobody going to be there to get on it. And then, okay, so another event that I planned that worked well, that was new for this particular, this was actually at another church that I served. It had been a little while since they had people call them different things, Easter extravaganza, spring fling, that kind of event. And I love to plan. Like, so like I know one of my spiritual gifts is administration. So I can see big picture and I can see every detail. And so from the very beginning, I enlisted of course, I laid out the vision and I shared the vision with the staff first. And then I shared the vision with like a core team that I was already close to and working with. And then I invited different people to lead different parts and build their own team. And I was very intentional about that event not being just for kids. So we had an outdoor component and an indoor component. So, you know, your seniors could walk the path of the cross inside in the air condition. And then you have the kids, of course, with the Easter egg hunt. We had like a little, the church had a gym, so we had like a basketball tournament as well. And of course, we invited, you know, the whole community and had an Easter bunny dressed up. And we even had the music ministry involved. So we had music, different ensembles from the music ministry to participate. So it really became a multi-generational whole church event and not just for the babies. And so that worked really well. A lesson from that one, you know, you have to have a clear vision. You have to over communicate. You have to promote, of course. And the other thing I think that I always try to keep in mind when I'm planning events, I can never be the only one that knows everything. If you have a leader of an event, the event should be able to go on whether or not the Leslin Kennebrew shows up, because you have communicated and planned that well, that other people can just take up the pieces and go with them because they know the ins and outs, and you're not the only one. And of course, keep all your notes in a folder, receipts, notes, and everything. So that way, you know, when I left, when I was went to another ministry position, I was able to hand that folder to the next person, and they didn't have to start from scratch like I did. So those are two things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That last piece of information too is so important and can be applied to anything, right? When I was serving the last church that I was working at, we had a settled minister of almost 20 years leave to go do regional ministry. And when he left, we found out that, oh, wow, there's a ton of things that we did not know that he did. Namely, he locked and opened the building every week. He knew exactly how to turn the certain thing that you had to do for the air conditioning to make it work. There was all of these things that he knew that none of us knew.
Yeah.
Same way, likewise, I am now going to be interning with a church plant here in Nashville. And one of the things that they were struggling with is that the one person who felt comfortable doing the technology piece of streaming, of Zoom, Facebook, you know, however they did it, wasn't always able to be there. And they were the only person that knew how to do that. So they really were in a bind. And some Sundays they weren't able to stream, or they weren't able to log on in the way that they normally did because they hadn't shared that information with other people. Yeah. So there's lots of nuggets in there that are so helpful. Let me ask the same question to Reverend Christy Love. Again, what are some things that you have tried before? Again, we're talking about why we're trying and what we're trying and how we're trying it. And what are some things that you tried before? One that didn't go so well, and two that did go really well. And what lessons did you learn from those?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm glad you tied that in there, Wesley, because I was going to say the same thing as far as DeLeslin's last comment. You know, if you're expanding to Zoom and Facebook and all the things, make sure you've got multiple people who know how to do that, because I've seen way too many churches right now that only one person's got that skill set and they get sick or something happens and they've had to cancel service. They've had to do all the things. So, you know, make sure as you guys are building those teams and those ministries and diversifying and innovating that you've got got a deep pool to pull from there. That's really, really important. So here are mine. I'm gonna follow your lead, DeLeslin, and I'm gonna start with the rough and end on a good note. So 15 years ago, before any of us had to imagine ministry via Zoom and all the things, I was in the midst of building I was in the midst of doing something that I thought was very small and local for my church. And God had entirely different plans. Y'all ever been there? Like, I think I'm doing this thing. And God's like, oh, honey, no, we're doing this thing. So I was in a place in a very small rural church at the time that did not have a women's ministry. And what they would do is they would do women's teas once a quarter. Now, I'm just going to be super upfront. I'm not a girly girl. Like, I don't do pink and ruffles. I don't do fancy teas. Like that's just not my personality. And I'm also someone who like deep conversations, deep theological conversations. Like you could sign me up for those all day long. I've always been the question asker. I grew up in a really conservative evangelical climate. And I was not popular in the youth group amongst our youth leaders because they would just be like, Christy, be quiet. Christy, be quiet. We'll talk about that later. Like, that's not what the lesson's on, because I just always have kind of had this holy curiosity and I like to ask questions. So when they would have these women's teas, they were always about kind of, fun and fancy and frilly topics. And they'd bring in guest speakers and to talk about being a great mom. And there's nothing wrong with those events, but like, I wanted to talk about eschatology and all of these kind of things. And so I pulled together a group of women who shared that, like, let's just have coffee and let's have some hard conversations, some deep conversations. And so we started doing that. Some other people heard about it and said, man, this is cool. I want to come to this. And then I don't even know how this happened, y'all, but God, right? Like, we all have those stories, but God. We all have the but COVID stories too, of how everything changed. But somebody came with a family member to one of those events and they went home to Texas. So I get a phone call a few weeks later from a woman in Texas who was working at a church who said, I want to bring what you're doing to my church in Texas. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I kind of explained to them how to do it. And they were like, no, like, we want to be a part of what you're doing. And so this was before Zoom. This was before Facebook Live. This was before there was great technology for this. So there was one or two terrible platforms at the time to attempt to stream live video. And we thought we would be super trendy and cutting edge and try one of those. It was a disaster because there just wasn't the technological infrastructure to stream a conversation between Missouri and Texas and to do that seamlessly and well like we can now. And so it was horrible. It was distracting on our end in Missouri. Texas was frustrated. Like, the whole thing was bad. And I ended the night going, okay, obviously we're not supposed to do that again. But I got a phone call immediately afterwards and they were like, how do we do this differently? We really feel like we want to be a part of this. And I'm glad didn't say, just do this on your own, right? Like, and like try to make it simple, because I just felt like there was this weird holy unction in me that God was up to something in that. And so I went back to the drawing board. We started brainstorming. We came up with the idea to record a video ahead of time that had a very short little, conversation, and then gave them some guided discussion. And I uploaded, well, actually, we uploaded it on YouTube first, and they were able to watch it there. And that worked amazingly. And suddenly Texas talked to somebody else. And before I knew it, within a matter of a year, we had these chapters, we called them, of this women's organization that we named Lead Her. We had those literally from coast to coast. We had them in Alabama and in Georgia and in California. And we would get a phone call that said, we meet in a building that has no Wi-Fi. What do? We still want to be a part of this. We've heard how amazing this is. So then we were like, okay, well, we need to burn DVDs and mail those to certain people. And that innovation, because we had DVDs, allowed us to then, when we had a country, or I had a chapter in Canada, we had a chapter in Haiti that said, we want to be a part of this too, we could mail DVDs out to them as well. And so what started out as a crazy night and just an easy to walk away and be like, well, that was a horrible failure. The fact that we tried something new and we kept trying, right? So sometimes I think we try something new and we give up and we're like, well, that didn't work. But if we will be willing to keep trying and follow the Holy Spirit's prompting in that, like for me, it was just this little nudge that was like, Christy, I need you to keep trying. Like I'm doing something here. Don't just write this off. Don't just give up. And so that was a powerful lesson for me in that season. That organization ended up working with women in 7 different countries. That ended up being 8 years of ministry for me. We worked with thousands of women on leadership development and discipleship. And it was just an incredible, incredible, beautiful way that God really used my heart. It was in those countries, in India and in Kenya, that I really became very burdened for issues related to poverty, which really then prompted me to look at my own backyard in Springfield, Missouri, and start asking some questions about poverty and about homelessness and about the American church and how we don't do a good job of engaging in those spaces a lot in our own backyards, which then ultimately led to us planting the Connecting Grounds, which is my current ministry experience. So something that has been good that we have tried here at the Connecting Grounds has been after our COVID stories. And so for us, we have a very unique congregational makeup. That's a whole nother webinar, but we do a lot of outreach work. We work with a lot of families that are de-churched, that are not interested at all in connecting in faith spaces because they've been hurt by the church in a lot of respects. They may have incredible personal faith, but they don't want to sit in an organized religious faith space. So we have a very interesting makeup. We have a lot of unsheltered individuals that call our church home. I have a lot of, just lay leaders and professionals in our community. So one of the issues that we have struggled with is just getting people to connect at the same time for online services, right? A lot of our people don't always have Wi-Fi connection because they're trying to get Wi-Fi at a coffee shop or, outside a library and try to get it by their phones if there's someone that doesn't have a permanent home. We've got people that are just busy and schedules are crazy right now. And, it's just been really hard to get everyone together to build relationships, to communicate. A lot of our congregation don't have email because a lot of our unsheltered individuals, that's not something that they check often. So, trying to send out newsletters wasn't working. We used Facebook for a long time as our primary method, but then really the divisiveness of Facebook drove a lot of people away from the platform. And they were just like, I just can't, my blood pressure cannot handle getting onto Facebook for church announcements. And so we had to be really creative. And so we developed, I'll show you here kind of really quick. We built our own app for our church. And so we have sermons on here where they can go back and watch go live, and that goes live on YouTube and on Facebook, so they can watch it right within the app. They can chat right there within the app, which is really cool. We have weekly announcements that we update every single week, and there's links to each one. So if I say, like this week, tonight is our 3-year anniversary celebration at our church. And so it was, all the directions on what time that starts, how to get there. And then next Saturday, we're having a serve day. So there's a link they can click right on that says, I want to sign up for that. But we also have like a button where they can get worship lyrics for this week's service, because when we stream those or we're doing outside services, we don't have the big screens to show worship lyrics. We've got a button where they can send us a prayer request and, be able to get those, and those go out to all of our leadership teams. Because we do a lot of outreach work, we also have a button that's like, here's where all the nightly meals are in our community, or here's a button that links to all the resources on shelters or food banks and things like that. And so that's been an ongoing innovation for us, but it's been incredibly successful, and the ability to push those notifications out to people. If we have an urgent need or, someone has a crisis, we can send an urgent need out to everybody right at once. And it's been a huge, huge improvement in communication. It's been a lot of work. It's not been, something that happened overnight. It's been kind of a trial and error process too. Some things didn't work, we had to try. But I really encourage you, that's something to check out and try if you've been struggling with communication and technology at all. So, and if you already use Planning Center in your churches, I know a lot of you may use that. Planning Center has the new publishing format, and that's actually what we used. And so it was already included, incredibly cost effective. So.
That is fantastic. I did not know that Planning Center had that option, but that is a great, easy way to do something that a lot of people are like, even me, when I hear create an app, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
But to know that those resources exist is wonderful. Another thing I want to add to this, and thank you so much, Chrissy, that was fantastic. Another thing I want to add is that a lot of times when we have these conversations, and if you ever get a chance to go watch the webinar we did on hybrid church, a lot of people hear all these things and think we can't do that, or I can't do that. And what I hope that what you get from this conversation is, you won't be able to do everything that everyone else does, right? But what you can do is find out what will meet your folks' needs and the needs of the people that you're out there trying to reach, and how can you do that and do it successfully. You may not be able to come up with an app, but what is something that you can do and do successfully? The church plant that I'm going to be interning at, they started in January of 2020. Okay, so probably the worst time to try and plant a church, right? At least in hindsight. So one of the things that they are working to do is just get a stable Zoom call, because right now it's the planter pastor who is running, and it's a Evangelical Lutheran Church in America plant. So they have an intensive liturgy they follow, and she can't do all of that and run Zoom. So when I come in there to help, all I'm doing is, I'm not doing an app, I'm not doing anything fancy or anything like that. I'm just doing what they can do and do it successfully. And that's what I hope that you glean from that. I will say though, whenever it is time to do something else, there are tools out there. The fact that is fantastic about this, that Planning Center is able to publish an app. I did not know that, but that is, if you use that program, it's very easy to use, it's very intuitive, and this is wonderful news to help those people who want to take that next step in their technological ministry. I want to move on to the next question, and this question will really set up what was going to be our initial question. But I think we want to end with that, because we're kind of working our way backwards now. So for our panelists, the next question is, what are some reasons that you have seen or witnessed, either firsthand or indirectly, of why people are opposed to trying new things? And let me start with, we'll start with Christy this time, and then we'll end with DeLeslin.
Fear. Like, I think that's one of the biggest ones. There's a lyric to a song, and I can't attribute it because I can't remember exactly who sings it, but the lyric goes, "Fear has killed more dreams than failure." And I think that is so incredibly powerful, because I think so often we have a fear of trying new things, a fear of trying big things, a fear of creating things, because we imagine in our minds, A, how much work it's going to be, B, that nobody's going to want to help and I'm going to end up doing it all myself, C, that it's going to be a mess and all these things are going to go wrong, or quite possibly D, it's going to go right, and then how am I actually going to manage it for the long run? And so we have all of these fears that many times I think paralyze us from ever even trying. And so I talk to people all the time who say, I had this idea or I have this dream, and my question is almost always, well, what's kept you from doing that? And so often it's like, I'm just afraid, fill in the blank. I'm just afraid I won't actually know how to do it. I'm afraid I won't have enough resources. I'm afraid I won't get enough volunteers. And, I typically respond with, well, how will you know if you don't try? And I think that is the biggest thing that I tell people all the time is, we are people of faith who are called by a creator who is in the business of still creating. And so if God is in it and he is calling you to it, then A, I think we have an obedience issue, and B, we have a trust issue in a lot of spaces when we allow fear to restrain us from traveling with God on a journey that we feel like he's prompted us to. And so that would be my answer, hands down.
Thank you. Yes. Pastor DeLeslin, will you go next, please?
Yes. Now I want you to brace yourself now, because I know y'all don't want to name this word in the church. But I think one of the reasons people don't try is because of bullying. There are bullies in congregations, people who will use their longtime membership, their finances, their position in order to speak negatively about trying something new. And so that those negative comments by the bullies in the congregation, and you may think, oh, you know, that they're not a bully because they, you know, they real quiet. No, bullies can work in groups. Bullies can be the sweetest little people at the door. Bullies can be your pastors. Bullies can be your grandmothers and your grandfathers and your cousins. Bullies can be related to you. Bullies can be church officers. Bullies can be in all kind of positions in the church. Anyone who is speaking negatively and using their influence and their power in that particular community to intimidate, to threaten, to hinder progress. So that's what I would add to that conversation. So I think people don't try definitely because of fear, but I also think people don't try because there are bullies in churches.
Yes. Show of hands, raise your hand if you've encountered a bully in your church settings. Yeah. Yeah, it's most of you. Yeah. And that's unfortunate, but that is a very real truth. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Before we go to our last facilitated question, and then we'll move into some one-on-one question and answer section, I wanted to just point out too that, you know, Chrissy, you talked about fear, and you talked about this, and we're going to get into this as to what's a theological reason as to trying. But there are so many scriptural stories surrounding people who were afraid to do something. I just took a class where we revisited some stories that I hadn't read in the Bible since I learned them in like grade school. You know, Jonah, I haven't read Jonah in a long time. Ruth, I haven't read Ruth in a long time. And rereading them as an adult is a very different experience, I will add. But I'm just thinking about Jonah being scared to do what God had called him to do. And as we all know, he never got away from that. God followed him wherever he went and told him what he was called to do. So even if we are afraid, sometimes having that, and we'll get into this when we talk about our theological reasons for why, just remembering that God will be with us no matter what, it will help us. And another thing I wanted to add, one of the things that a lot of people in this room said is that they mentioned that, they mentioned their age, but their desire to do what God is calling them to do, even in this later stage of their life. And show of hands, how many scriptural stories are there of God calling people at the later stages of their lives to do amazing and remarkable things for the glory of God and for the betterment of the world? There are so many stories. So I love that so many of you brought that up. That speaks to your willingness. So to end our facilitated time together, and then we'll move into our question and answer. Let me start with Deleslin this time, and then we'll go back to Christy. What is your theological backing for why we should try things?
Yeah. Great question. My theological backing and grounding as it relates to innovation in ministry, whether that's innovation in worship, innovation in technology, innovation in organizational structure, innovation in outreach, is this: our God is the ultimate designer, creator, and innovator. Our God is the ultimate designer, creator, and innovator. And if we are created in the image of the Almighty God, then there's some of that in us. There's some design in us. There's some creativity in us. There's some an innovative spirit in each and every one of us. And the way that and I believe that God is always extending an invitation to uncharted paths. God is always extending an invitation to uncharted paths. So it blew my mind how many churches were like caught off guard in the pandemic, because none of this is new. Facebook Live has been happening for years. Zoom has been happening for years. People have been online for years. And so when so many churches were caught off guard, I was like, to me, that speaks to how people are not being sensitive to the move of the Spirit. And so, so one of the things that, I'll say, as the ultimate creator, designer, innovator, God is always extending an invitation to uncharted paths. Innovation is happening all of the time. And my personal definition of innovation, that it's probably still a work in progress, is innovation is a new and fresh expression of divine creativity manifested in the earth, often as a result of prayerful, empathetic, prophetic, and intentional actions to the glory of God. And it is with that in mind that I believe that we need to be open to innovation and new initiatives in ministry.
Thank you for sharing that. That is a wonderful definition. I don't know if you've got that somewhere that you could copy and paste that and put into the chat, but I know that other people would appreciate. Yes, so we already have someone saying, "Can you give us that definition?" I know they would love that. Yes, absolutely. You kind of spoke about that or preached about that in our commissioning service a couple weeks ago, and that was just profound. That we serve a creative, designing God, and then we as the church are always behind the times, right? We serve a God who has created and is creating, and yet we are still stuck in so many ways behind the times. And we don't do that to be hip. We don't do that to be innovative, but we do it to be relevant to the ministries around us, right? Or we should, at least. So thank you for sharing that. Christy, if you would please share what your theological grounding is for why to try these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to build on what DeLeslin just said. We do serve a creative God who, like I said before, is in the business of still creating, and creating requires change. And when we change things, we naturally are bringing about and birthing new creation. And so it's a partnership between us and the creator. And I think that is such a beautiful privilege when we can see things in that capacity, that God chose us to be an instrument of creation still into the world, and that he moves through us to create as creative expressions in so many different ways. And so if he's prompting us to try something as a church or as a leader individually, as a lay person in the church, if he puts something on your heart, then I think we've got to keep in mind that trying is trusting, and trusting is a form of worship. And so when you are innovating and you are creating, you are in worship. And so much yes and amen to what DeLeslin said. How was it that the church was caught off guard by this pandemic, and we found ourselves unable to figure out how to facilitate worship and connection and community, because we had been so focused on what we had been doing for so darn long, because it was the routine, it was the habit, it was the thing. And we allowed these spaces and these traditions and, these practices to become so rote and so embedded in who we were, that I'm going to say an unpopular thing and say, I think it put us as an American Western church into a position of disobedience in a lot of ways. I think that God has been trying to reinvent and has been trying to call and woo the American church out of a place of complacency and apathy for a long, long time. I think that God has been trying to call innovators to the forefront for a long time in the church. And like DeLeslin said, there are bullies, not just in our churches, but even in our denominational spaces and in our church structures, who will say, hold on, time out, that's not how we do things. But God has been trying to birth a new thing for a long time. And personally, COVID has been this chance that I think for all of us to have to re-examine why we do what we do. Short story, our church launched in a strip mall. Because of our outreach ministries, we literally were kicked out of our church. And so we had city leaders and neighborhood people who came to us and said, we don't want those people in our area. Mind you, the entire city was shut down at the time, but that didn't matter. So we lost our building. So we inherited a building, and that's what brought us actually to be part of the disciples. But in that season for us, we were trying to, create a new church. We were trying to build a new thing. And it would have been so easy for us to just say, let's just, use it the way that it is. And let's keep this really easy. And we thought, no, we're going to do things completely different. And so every piece along the way, as we've remodeled this little space, we've asked ourselves why. Like, why are we going to put chairs back in rows? If we can't explain why, then chairs don't need to go in rows. So what do we do instead? And really trying to think outside the box on every step of like picking up pieces of our tradition and what is ours to put back into play and what is ours to say, that tradition and that practice had its time. I don't necessarily know that we need to carry that forward into the next season. And that's a practice that is incredibly prayerful, incredibly holy. It is a worshipful practice for leadership teams to do that. It's a scary practice. Going to make some people upset in our churches because there are practices we're going to choose to put away that they may really be attached to. But trusting and in that form of worship, trying new things as a form of trusting is so critically important.
Absolutely. Yes. One of the things that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation is that now is the perfect time to do these things, right? A lot of times we don't want to try new things because why? It makes us uncomfortable. Well, how many of you are uncomfortable with how we are worshiping right now, right? I'm uncomfortable. So why not take this time to try and see what new things God could be breathing into the world and into our worship and into our work in the world right now, rather than just trying to catch up with the rest of the world. Why not see what's new and what's next? Thank you for sharing. We're going to move into a time of facilitated question and answer. If you've got any types of question, now I know we talked more about why try and why innovation, but if you've got some more specific questions around technology or anything like that, feel free to ask that. These two ladies are very well versed in that area as well. And I would love if you would raise your hand either on Zoom or it's not too big of a group. I can probably just see if you want to raise a hand physically, and ask these questions and either address Christy or DeLeslin or both of them, and we'll try and move through this pretty quickly. So who has a question? All right, Albert, why don't you go ahead?
My question would be, oh, sorry, hold on. I had my phone up so I could hear the audio. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
My question would be, going to a totally online church. As you see, I'm in Alaska. We're the only DOC church in Alaska. There's a lot of population that we don't get exposed to. And hybrid church works well for what we're doing, but the other part of that means it's a Sunday only kind of church. What are your thoughts about going to an online church totally in addition to doing the hybrid church? Anybody want to take a shot at it?
I can jump in there for a minute, Albert. So like I said a minute ago, we lost our church building 18 months ago. We have not had a church home for 18 months. And so we haven't even been able to be hybrid. We've been 100% online for 18 months. And so we've had to do the thing in a way that we never imagined we would be doing the thing. And, what I would say to you is if you're looking at doing something like that, it can be done. It takes some creativity, and it does take, some looking at what are some different ways we can do things. I would encourage you to maybe what we did was we kind of mapped out, like, what are the most important components to a more traditional experience that we still wanted to be able to maintain. For us, relationships was a big part of it. So we needed to figure out how to facilitate connections and relationships. We created small Facebook groups to do we called them connecting groups. And so small groups became Facebook groups. And, we had a group for parents, and they had conversations and Facebook live chats, and they posted funny memes about trying to survive toddlerhood and quarantine and all of those things. We had a Facebook group for couples over 50, and they posted their own conversations and how COVID was impacting them. We had a group for people that were in addiction recovery, and all the triggers that were built into COVID and quarantine, and how difficult it was at that time to not be able to go to AA meetings. And that group kind of became their sobriety support system. And so we used Facebook groups for a long time. And then when we noticed some people really needed to get away from Facebook for their own mental health, we got creative again. And that's when we turned to Planning Center. They have the groups function in there, and it allowed for chat in there. And so when they all installed that app on their phone, their groups could chat. Or we looked at, some groups chose to do like a group me or different things like that. For me, as the pastor, I had to realize, like, be hands off a little bit in that process, right? Like, give suggestions, but also give those groups the flexibility to connect the way that worked best for them. And so, I would do a regular Zoom with our group leaders, and that was a great way for me to know what's going on with some of our people and families, and, who do I need to be connecting with? Because I wasn't seeing them in a traditional service. And so, we've really had to think outside the box. We do an event we used to love called Coffee and Questions. We've now gone totally virtual to that too, where we just make a cup of coffee, log into Zoom, and we talk about headlines and current events and how does that relate to us in faith, and just a lot of processing and deconstruction and some of those kind of things that a lot of our individuals have really been interested in. So we just, again, we pick it up and examine it. Is this piece important in this season in this way? And how could we do it in a fully digital manner? And it's just kind of one piece at a time would be my encouragement to you.
I think I would add, when folks was, kind of just going online, which still blows my mind, at the beginning of the pandemic, I did like a 20-minute online webinar, and I'll put the link in the chat on YouTube. And I always keep in mind the churches who may be small and are not very well resourced as it relates to people, finances. And the very first thing I will say is keep it simple, saints. Keep it simple, saints. I think a lot of times we can become intimidated because this church has big screens, and this church has fancy cameras, and this church has wonderful lighting. Keep it simple, saints. So at the most basic level, all you need is a good laptop or a good camera on your phone and some good lighting. At the most basic level, keep it simple. Don't try to get all fancy if you can't maintain fancy. Keep it simple, keep it very practical. Pick the platform that works best for you. You do not have to do all of the things right now. If Facebook works good for you, focus on Facebook. If Zoom works good for you, focus on Zoom. And Zoom does have a feature where you can just click and go live on Facebook. So, FYI, you don't have to try to do both or whatever. But keep it simple. A couple of things that I shared in that webinar is also you want to be mindful of the time as well. Just because you will have an hour and a half service in person don't mean somebody gonna sit and watch you an hour and a half online. And every preacher needs to assume your preaching is not that good for somebody to sit there for 30 to 45 minutes online listening to you. You know, they did it on Sunday morning because out of respect, we gonna sit there and listen to the preacher preach. But online, I got options. So keep that sermon about 15 minutes max. Now, unless you just, you just an extraordinary preacher that somebody else has been a witness of, or another preacher who will tell you the truth. So, keep it simple, keep that service 20 to 30 minutes online. I'm one of those that will, if I get to your church, and just because everybody love, let me make sure ain't nobody on here named Sally. Just because everybody loves Sally singing in person, y'all love Sally. I don't know Sally, and Sally sounds a mess. But don't nobody have a heart to tell her because Sally been leading that same song for 20 years. So make sure that what you put out is the best that you can put out, because it's not just about your people. Think about your online platform as you are going into the highways and the byways of the world. This is not just about your people who you used to seeing, who may or may not come back to your church like you think they are. This is about really getting an opportunity to get the gospel out there in the best way that you can. So keep it simple, have a decent camera, have some really good lighting. Don't be, watch your camera angles. Don't be all up here and, all like this and, watch your camera angles. Be mindful, get feedback. Ask somebody to watch it. Ask a young person to watch it and say, hey, how does this look? What do you think about this? Everybody don't want to see your empty sanctuary. People talk about, oh, they miss seeing the sanctuary. But I don't want to see no empty pews. If I'm visiting, I don't want to see your empty pews, your empty chairs, your empty choir stand. Keep it on the person that's speaking. If people want to be in the building and y'all are open, let them come and see the empty pews. But online, we don't need to see all of that. So just some basic things that you need to keep in mind. Keep it simple, good camera, good lighting, and keep it short.
Thank you. I will add to that too, Albert, that sometimes the unpopular thing to say here is that moving online will not meet everyone's needs. And you may shift in the people that attend. But I will say that as we move to a more virtual world, I don't foresee these tools that we're using becoming obsolete once everything's better. So the church plant that I'm going to be working with, they have folks who tune in every week from all across the United States to watch. And they have lost some people who, when they decided to be completely virtual during this time, and even though people thought it was safe enough to come back and they hadn't felt that comfortable yet, they lost some people. But they've gained people too who are able to join from all over. And it sounds like that might be something that you might be interested in because of you being the only DOC church in Alaska. So unpopular thing to say probably, but a reality that we must prepare ourselves for. All right, what's another question? We've got a little bit of time left. I want to see if there's any more questions. Yes, Becky, you want to go next? You're still muted, Becky.
Sorry about that. I have a quick question for Christy. You mentioned that you started all these online small groups, and I have to say that facilitating small groups is challenging and requires some training and some specific, personality traits and some, there's got to be some oversight to that. So I'm just wondering how you handled that, particularly like your group you mentioned that did talked about current events and that kind of thing. Did you have some kind of facilitator training, or how did you handle that?
Yeah, great question. So we do small group training as an ongoing thing in our world, in our church. And so, if I've got people, I meet with our small group leaders once a month. We used to just, get together for coffee and talk and kind of, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? What are you struggling with? We did some leadership development in those spaces, some ministry training, trauma training. That's a big thing that is, on my heart, is creating trauma informed, trauma aware ministry spaces. And so we do a lot of trauma training with our small group leaders because they're on the front lines and they're seeing that and experiencing things with people and triggers and current ongoing traumas. So we just moved that to Zoom. And so we would meet once a month. And if people were interested in getting involved, or we would see a need for, there's a lot of people that have started connecting recently that, are non-binary teenagers and young adults. It would be really great to have a space where they could connect all together and have some conversations related to, their experiences and how they're processing some things. So then I would kind of pay attention to who we had in our collective. And a lot of times I would issue an invitation and I would say, hey, I've noticed that, this might be a really good opportunity for you to step into a little bit more leadership. And so it usually started with me having a conversation to do some training with them, what that would look like, set some expectations. I was in all of our groups. And so all the Facebook groups I would be in, I would mute the notifications on the groups. And I did that because I didn't engage in them. But if someone sent me a text and said, hey, so-and-so just posted this and I'm not sure how to respond, I could go in and look, and then I could get a hold of them and say, maybe we take the conversation this way, or maybe ask this question, or, I think that's a private conversation we need to be having outside of the group. But make sure you say that, like, I'm going to get a hold of you privately, so people aren't like, did we just ignore that? So that's how I tend to handle a lot of those things. And then, like I said, we meet once a month to just kind of look at things, talk about things, and go from there.
That I think that helps a lot, because it is a little more complicated than just saying, hey, I think we'll just have a group online.
Absolutely. Right? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We talk a lot about boundaries and all the things when it comes to small groups.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, us too, but things have changed a little bit because of online stuff. The other question I had is, how do you handle finances? One of the things that's been a struggle for us is that we actively reach out to people who've been alienated from church. And so that means they don't have a history of, tithing or, understanding. And we, on purpose, don't have a lot of expenses, right? But when you're all online and you're just doing this small group thing, tell me about how you approach people about giving and what that looks like on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, we are really unique in how we handle giving all the time anyway, because even when we were in service, we never took up an offering. We never passed an offering plate. We never talked about offering in our service. I would have a slide at the beginning and the end of service that would just say, if you want to support the work of the Connecting Grounds, and here's the different ways that you can give. So we would have, we called it our change for change bucket. And so it was back on our coffee bar, and, people could drop things in there if they wanted to. We actually operate much more like a nonprofit when it comes to resources, because we have a lot of people who support us on a monthly basis who don't even go to our church. It's really a unique situation. And part of that is because they believe in the outreach work that we do with the unsheltered population or with foster families. And so they're supporting a lot of that work. We have a lot of people who believe in our church, who go to other churches, who want to see a safe space created for people who, don't have a comfort level in the church. And so we have a really unique situation in that. But I will say, we do use online giving. So that's always an option. When we did our app, we built online giving into the app. And so it's literally 2 buttons that someone can click in the app. They just hit give, and it lets them type in how much they want to give. They can put their credit card in, and they just say, does this go to outreach or does this go to our operating expenses? And then they just, push the button and there they go. So that's how we've handled it, and it's worked really well.
I will say, add one thing about giving. Ask, because even if you're just online, people think that, your expense, and some of your expenses have probably gone down because you're online. But if you have staff, you still got to pay them salaries. You still want them lights on when you come back to the building. You still, Like if you do outreach costs, ministry costs. And so, I think one of the big things is just to create options for people to give. Now, I have not written a check or given cash to a church in years, but make sure you have cash options if you're in person. Make sure you have, a check option for people to, give in their envelopes. Make sure you have online options. You have to have an online option to give, because these days you will miss a significant portion of income if you do not have an online option. And statistics show that giving usually increases when you have online options, because people will not give. People not going to go to the ATM to make sure they have $25 for the offering, or what have you. So just make sure that you have options for people to give, and it is okay to invite people to give.
Absolutely. I also think letting them know what their money is going towards is always super helpful, because even during this time when they're not meeting in the building, perhaps there are still those expenses that Delesslyn talked about. So let them know what those expenses are. If they know what their money is going towards, they're probably more likely to give. Like, oh yeah, they're still paying the light bill, they're still paying pastor's salary, so let's give. Friends, we have come to the end of our time together. I'm going to post in the chat, just again, New Church Ministries website, and also a link so that you can register for our upcoming New Church Hacks episode that's this next Wednesday on decolonizing the church, a topic that is very important following all of the racial unrest that we had. It's been going on for way longer than last year, but last year seemed to highlight it in a new way. So as we as white allies and working as to be anti-racist, this is a great opportunity for us to do so. So I put that in the chat box if you want to register for that. That is next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time. If you are not able to attend, go ahead and register anyway, and we'll send you the link to the webinar after the fact. I want to thank Pastor Miriam for hosting us today. I want to thank the Northern Lights region for having us today. I want to give just a few more moments to Dr. Kennebrew and to Reverend Love if they want to plug anything, any projects, workshops, books, anything like that they want to share. If you would, please go share that now and put it in the chat too. Christy, you want to go first?
Sure, absolutely. So I've got two ways that you can with me, one of which is, as Wesley mentioned at the beginning, I wrote a book this year, released in April, called God of the Gaps. And so it is a book about finding faith in the in-between spaces of your life. It makes an amazing small group study that really walks people through, especially this COVID era. This has been a huge in-between space for a lot of people between health and normalcy and all of those things. And so it's got a discussion guide that goes with it. So you can go to godofthegaps.org to learn more about that project and discussion guide. So I'll drop that in there. And the other thing that I will tell you about too is we are starting to kind of create an online community with a brand new Facebook group as the very first step of lots of things to come with what we are going to eventually be releasing as a Faith and Trauma Institute. And so if you have any interest in learning more and more about trauma and how that impacts faith spaces, how that impacts people, what that looks like for us as faith leaders to be trauma informed, how that knowledge can shape how we do ministry and outreach and all of those things. We literally just started this Facebook group last week. And so it is brand new. There's only a handful of us in there, but it's a great time that you can jump in once a week. We're going to be sharing some resources and having some discussions. And there will be many, many more things to come that will be announced there first and foremost. So if that's a place you want to connect, you can jump in there too. So I'll put both of those links in the chat.
Okay. Again, thank you all for your time and attention, for the opportunity to share on today. One, I will invite you to be a part of our innovation circles here in the greater Kansas City region. Every third Thursday, we have innovation circles where we are looking at videos, listening to podcasts, looking at articles, and talking about what's next for the church. That's every third Thursday. My name is actually mine my Facebook name. So I have I guess a graphic about the Innovation Circles, and you can log on to Zoom for that. So Innovation Circles third Thursdays. I would invite you as well to I wrote a book a few years ago called Step Out of the Boat. And it is about taking that step forward. And so, and it's based on Matthew 14, when Peter walks on water. And I think God is calling us to walk on water in this season. And so, so it's definitely, it's a book more about transition and stepping out and taking that first step when the Lord says come. And then the last thing I will invite is just continue, you all just keep having the conversations. And if you wanted to reach out to me about, innovation and or design thinking, about how you all can begin to actually initiate some of the things that we've talked about, whether it's related to technology or whether it's just related to ministry. I love talking church. So, so yeah, just feel free to reach out, and I'll be glad to, schedule time and have conversation with you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to both our panelists. Appreciate you and all of the insight that you brought. Pastor Miriam, is there anything else we need to do today? If not, I was going to say a quick benediction prayer and we'll be done.
That's fine. Just a big thank you to all of you who participated, our presenters, and as well as each one that's on this call. I think there was some great information out there. We just have to now kind of break it down and see how it works in our own context. So on behalf of Sandy Messick, our on sabbatical regional minister, and the Northern Lights, thank you so much, Wesley and Dr. Deslin and Christy. Yes, Wesley, lead us out with a benediction. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again, friends. God be with you. God go before you. God be behind you, beside you, and in you and through you. May God's work in the world through you, through your hands and feet, be benefiting to the kingdom of God. We look forward to seeing the ways that these innovation conversations hopefully benefit you and your ministries. And until we meet again, God be with you.